Hey folks, welcome back to the Husker Big Red YouTube channel. I'm Chris Peterson, and with me as always is my co-host is Danny Gillette. And we're back for another episode here on Saturday morning. We're off to a hot start here, but we're here to talk some Nebraska football. We usually are doing our live streams on Saturday morning, but we didn't quite have time to do one of those today, so you're just going to do a normal podcast episode here. But it's been another exciting week of fall camp. How are you doing this morning, Danny?
I'm doing good. There's been a lot of news coming out lately, both out of fall camp and also some pro Big Red news to talk about, which is always good to see. Kind of frustrating because with all these pro Big Red, you would think that we would have a winning season or two, but I digress. And I'm happy for the boys who were able to, or the men, excuse me, who were able to play well in the first kind of set of preseason games. And I don't know. I'm just really excited. Let's see. I'm looking at my calendar here. I'm not good with numbers, but we have, let's see, today's the 12th, so 19 days until the opener. So that's exciting too. We're finally getting to the point where we can stop, speculating and talk about actual things that are going on. So I'm excited for that as well. And it's felt like a long but productive off season, and I'm excited to see everything kind of get going here in just a couple weeks.
It is crazy, just a few weeks away, like you said, 19 days, less than 3 weeks, and we'll be, headed to Minnesota, and we'll start to learn a lot about, this team. We won't have to, wonder who's playing where so much, and we kind of, it's not, Nebraska's pretty open with their stuff. I mean, guys talk about where they play. You get some videos, and the coaches talk quite a bit. So we are lucky, I think, as Nebraska fans, to get as much access as we've got, from Matt Rule and company so far. But obviously, still a lot of question marks, and there's been some injuries piling up too. And that's normal through fall camp. But wide receiver, I mean, Marcus Washington's been banged up a couple of times. Malachi Coleman was banged up, but he's been back out at practice the past couple of days, which has been good. It's nothing really serious. The one major injury was, of course, Maverick Noonan, which was a real bummer. Just not only because I thought that he could contribute this year, on the two deep as a pass rusher, at that jack position, but also that just when you miss a whole year of I mean, even if the guy doesn't play, that's still missing out on development. But at least it doesn't sound like it was an ACL injury. It does sound like he does need surgery though, so like a 6-month thing. So too bad for him. He'll have to use this as a redshirt year, but I'm confident that he'll bounce back. But those are the types of things you hate to see in fall camp.
Having broken a couple of back discs last year and kind of working my way back from that, I can kind of empathize with him on the rehab portion of things. And it takes a lot of mental toughness, a lot of strength, and there's going to be good days and bad days. But I'm confident that he'll be able to contribute and help out next year. And I certainly wish him the best. And like I've said in a couple articles this week, this is the part of fall camp I absolutely hate. I always want teams to go through training camp with a clean injury slate, although that's rarely the case. And another thing, people were asking, with this recruiting class, why are we recruiting so many receivers? Why so many receivers? Why we need this, and blah blah blah. Couple wide receiver injuries, and now your depth starts to get tested a little bit. This is why you recruit 75,000 wide receivers. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see who steps up. Matt Rule talked about guys like Jalen Lloyd and Jaden Doss stepping up and contributing during practice. I believe because there's two Bullocks. I believe it was Alex Bullock who, was mentioned by Matt Rule as a guy that can step up at wide receivers. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see who takes advantage of this opportunity with a couple guys banged up a little bit. And, for the banged up guys, I'm hoping that they heal quickly because, you know, uh, Malachi Coleman was a guy that, could potentially come in and contribute right away. Xavier Betts is another guy, and you know, there's been rumors about Betts this week, but I question the validity of those. I mean, especially on Nebraska Twitter, one person says a rumor and then it just completely takes off. So I'm hoping that the Betts rumors are false. I believe they are, and you know, uh, I'm just hoping we can get healthy in short order. I mean, that's one of the downsides of starting so soon is that you kind of don't get that extra couple days to rest. But that's the game of football, and at least I guess we're tackling in practice now. So we got to start somewhere.
Yeah, that's which is a good sign. But yeah, lots of weird in message board rumors about a bunch of different receivers for whatever. So I mean, if stuff comes out, if it's gets reported, obviously we'll talk about it. But it seems, yeah, like you said, Xavier Betts put a lot of work in to get back to this point. So that would seem strange. I mean, I don't even want to talk about some of the other like guys that were literally on the pictured on the field yesterday, and people were talking about them quitting on the message boards. So I don't know. It's Nebraska. Twitter and the message boards can get kind of crazy, so you have to kind of sift through the nuttiness with that sometimes. But back to the injury stuff, it is nice to see us hitting, and I think Matt Rule is, just that was one thing I've noticed, from some comments just throughout, is I think he's doing a lot better job of utilizing the practice time. Not There's not as many guys standing around as there was during the Scott Frost era, and I think he is trying to get more reps for these younger players, which I do believe will help their development long term. On the injury front, Teddy Prohashka is one injury I think that I'm still, looking at, and we'll see if he's able. They said he's probably going to be able to go week 1, but it was like Matt Rule kind of slipped that in, like maybe not even till week 2. So I mean, it doesn't seem like he's really. I just don't think he's going to be that healthy. I think that Turner Corcoran's going to start that first game at left tackle. That doesn't mean that Teddy. I don't think they should play Teddy unless he's 100%, because they did that to him last year in those first couple of games, and that didn't help him or the team. So they need to make sure that because Corcoran can play left tackle. I'm not saying he's the best in the world, but he can play there. And I do think that these guys are going to play better, under this new coaching staff. That's at least my hope. And along with the offensive system, I think will put them in a better position to succeed. Other than last year, that didn't always happen, but we'll see. Those are big. And then Nordine Nueli is another one too, because he's really a guy that I'm hoping he'll start. He was in the green jersey earlier this week, so I think that's more of a cautionary thing. But he's a guy that could be an NFL type player. So I think getting him back, and then Ben Scott, like those two additions on the interior offensive line, should really solidify that part of the group for the Huskers.
And also, freshman Eric Fields has been, drawing some praise from the coaching staff. He's on the two deep. He has somewhat of a special teams role, according to multiple reports. And I mean, we talked about it before. I loved Fields when we were able to land him. I think he has a tremendous amount of speed. I mean, there are questions as to the level of competition he played in high school in Oklahoma, but I mean, it looks like he can play. I mean, I don't think he was, gifted any statistics or anything like that. I truly believe he can play. So I'm happy to see that even, prior to his injury, Maverick Noonan, Eric Fields, like those guys are at least, making the two deep. And, you know, if that's the case, that to me means that, the coaching staff and the players are developing and working hard and trying to get on the field, which is something we hadn't always seen in previous years.
Yeah, it's interesting. Fields is playing mostly at Rover now, and he's behind obviously Isaac Gifford, who's been one of the stars of fall camp. I definitely think we're going to see Fields a lot on special teams because he can run and tackle, and he can hit people. And I do feel like we are going to see him get some. Like he's definitely one of the freshmen that's going to play 4 games, beyond 4 games this year, no question in my mind. Like Cameron Lenhart and like Prince William and Malin, all those guys are going to play. If they're healthy for 12 games, they're playing in 12 games. Like those guys are just needed at certain positions. But it was good to say. I do think Maverick Noonan definitely would have been, in the mix at that jack position had he been healthy. And he did some nice things in the spring too. So that was a good sign for him. On the offensive side of the ball, we've seen it's hard to to kind of put everything into context, but we've seen Malachi Coleman make nice catches, at least even have pictures of that. So obviously there's going to be some growing pains, just kind of adjusting to a new offensive system, for a lot of those guys, and getting adjusted to a new quarterback in Jeff Sims. I know the Big Ten Network guys talked about, there's a lot of talent at wide receiver, but not, there's not those proven guys. And I get that to a point, but I feel like, Thomas Fidone is going to, supplement that at tight end. It's the Eric Gilbert thing, man. I don't know if that's going to happen. I know, I wrote about it this week, and, some people, because there's been some other cases of guys, like Devontae Walker, who basically only ever played at Kent State. He was with 2 other programs, but never played a game, and transferred to North Carolina to be closer to family, like for medical issues, and his waiver got denied by the NCAA. So I know that, people have said like Arik Gilbert has, mental health, qualifications or, the issues that's what led him to transfer. And I hope that that's true, but he's going to be able to have to prove that case to the NCAA, because if that's not true, he's not going to get a waiver this season. I just don't think that. I think they're being very strict in that process, and it's kind of a complete 360 from where they were, a year ago, where they were just granting waivers for everything.
Typical NCAA, right? And yeah, I'm not feeling warm and fuzzy about his waiver. I know Gilbert's situation is different than a lot of other situations, but to me, it feels like the NCAA is, I don't want to say not considering situations, but it's either black and white for them or nothing at all. And to me, that means that Gilbert's waiver maybe he doesn't get approved, and if that's the case, then obviously that's very disappointing. And we'll see how things shake out. I don't want to go into a tangent about something that we don't even know yet, but it doesn't look good as far as Gilbert's waiver is concerned, in my opinion.
Well, and the kid that was trying to play for North Carolina this season, he transferred from Kent State, and it was, I don't think he had mental health reasons. It was family medical stuff, though, and Kent State did support him playing right away, just like Georgia has for, Arik Gilbert. So that used to be kind of an automatic thing. Like if the school was in favor of him, like if Georgia and Nebraska are both in favor of him playing, then generally the NCAA would just, kind of grant that waiver. But they've changed that to really discourage guys, I think, from taking that second year transfer. Basically, like they're saying, like if you transfer a second time, unless you have a really good reason, you're not going to get to play right away. So I don't know. It's not like I've seen Arik Gilbert's application. I have no knowledge about it. It just seems that, unless he has a really strong case for, I left Georgia for these mental reasons, not because of playing time. You know what I mean? That I don't know how solid that case is. I hope it is a good case for him and he's able to play. But if it was, why the hell is it taking so long?
Yeah,
That's another question. So we'll see. I know if he doesn't play, Nate Borkacher's played really well. He's a scholarship player now, and as long as
he
him
looks
and
bigger too.
yeah, as long as him and Fedoni can stay healthy, then I feel like Nebraska's pretty solid at that position. It's obviously all about, Thomas Fedoni is such a key part to this offense. Um, I mean, Billy Kemp's obviously, I feel good about him, and Marcus Washington once he gets healthy, but Thomas Fedoni, is the big X factor to me outside of Jeff Sims.
Yeah, and he hasn't been able to really see the field much due to injury, and you know some people forget that he was the number 2 overall tight end recruit in the 2020 class, I believe it was, behind Brock Bowers. So I mean, when you look, or was he number 2 or number 1?
I think he was number 2. Yeah, I think he was 2021, but I think he was number
2021.
2.
That's right. That's right. Because I remember. Okay, yeah. So I mean, this kid was no slouch coming out of high school, and I think he just hasn't been able to stay healthy. And he saw the field in limited action against Wisconsin in 2021, I believe it was, but he didn't really do anything. So, I mean, I just hope he stays healthy, and with the success that Nebraska, with Austin Allen going into the NFL and kind of how they've been able to involve the tight end in their offense, I'd love to see that trend continue, because tight ends in college football and in the NFL, due to their size and the mismatches they create, are becoming huge for what is becoming a passing league.
Yeah, especially Fedoni, because he is 6'5" and like 240 or whatever, and I think he runs the 40 and probably like 4'6" or 4'5". I mean, he's that type of, he has receiver type speed and hands, but with the body of a tight end. So he's a special player. And yeah, hopefully we see him and Jeff Sims, connect for like 50, passes this year, 50, 60 passes, because I definitely think that Thomas Fedoni can catch like 50 some balls for like 700 yards this year. Like I don't think that is hyperbole. I don't think that's like, as long as he's healthy and plays every game this season, like I think that's totally doable with his skill set and how much I think Nebraska's going to feature him, because I do think Billy Kemp's going to be a big part of this offense. But
Yeah.
yeah, but when you look at mismatch type guys, Thomas Fedoni's number 1 on the list for Nebraska.
And honestly, the blocking that he can provide too when you run the football, that's huge as well. And I think we're going to see a very physical offense, and I think Fedoni's going to be a big part of that. I mean, whether it be blocking or just trying to create lanes for the running back, I think that's going to be an element of his game too. So I think you're absolutely correct when you say that he's going to be a big part of this offense.
And then, yeah, like we said, Berkshire, is a guy that's going to step up, and he's a nice blocker. And yeah, it's interesting too. A lot of the guys that you mentioned, Alex Bullock at receiver, and his brother John Bullock is doing some good things at linebacker. He's on scholarship now. I think he went. It's funny because they moved Fields from linebacker to safety. Well, he moved from safety to linebacker like when Rule first got here, and that's proven to work out pretty well. So I think he's another guy that's going to have a role this year. I like just the depth so far of the defense, except like I've said before, I am worried about that edge, defensive end position. But I think a lot of the pass rushing too is going to come from that jack linebacker spot. So we'll just have to see how it all works out. But I do think that we're going to definitely see, Yuma Malian and Cameron Lenhart like on the edge, with their hand in the dirt, standing up. I think we're going to see Sherman there. I think we're going to see Borders blitzing, Jamari Butler. All those guys are going to Ty Robinson.
Malcolm Hartzog, I think too. Honestly, in some
Yeah,
cases,
yeah, and blitzing too. Yeah, because he is a good blitzer, and all those guys. Luke Reimer. That's one thing that I think he does pretty well is pressure the quarterback. So, I think all those guys are going to have a role in putting pressure on the quarterback. But Nebraska doesn't have. Looking at it, they don't have that. 7.5, 8 sack guy. They're not even like a Garrett Nelson so far. So somebody needs to emerge this year. I would like to see Ty Robinson really elevate his game in terms of the interior pass rush, which I totally think he can do. And he played better last year. And
he
it was
did.
interesting. Tony White talked about how like he hasn't had linemen quite as big as Hutchmaker and Robinson inside. So I a lot of times I think we're going to see, even though it's a 3-3-5 defense, I think we're going to see a lot of like 2-4-5 fronts, like two down linemen, two edge players, four linebackers. I think it's going to be, I think you're going to see a lot of Robinson and a lot of Hutchmaker, and then a lot of guys like different edge players, jacks, bunch of different, lineups. But those two main guys inside, I think are going to play a lot.
Yeah, and I think that you're going to also, see a lot of moving parts in terms of the secondary. Tommy Hill's got some praise over the past couple of days. Then you have, the possibility of a player like Hartzog who can also play there. I mean, you talk about some of just these pure athletes that this defense has. Isaac Gifford, like you mentioned earlier, is another guy that has really kind of gotten a ton of praise from the coaching staff. So I think there's a lot of directions and personnel that we can use within this defense. And, I'm excited to see what Tony White does. And, people were getting on him yesterday for saying that the defense isn't quite where they want to be at. And to be quite honest, if the defense was where they needed to be in the third week of camp, I'd be a little bit worried. So I don't think his comments yesterday were that big a deal at all. I mean, it's a type of damned if they do, damned if they don't. Because if Tony White says our defense is going to kick ass, we're going to be awesome, and then we completely fall flat against Minnesota, then me and you will be dissecting it on our next show. And sometimes it's easier just for coaches to keep things close to the vest, and it also lets your players know that hey, me as a coach, I'm not resting on my laurels either. We still have a lot of work to do.
And coaches, they don't want to reveal too much, and they don't want to say, they don't want to be overconfident. Like even if they do feel good about their team, they're still just going to say, they're always going to give you that coach speaks. I mean, when they talk, I pay attention when they talk about players and their roles about players because that's
Yeah.
what interests me more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned Hartzog, and yeah, it was interesting. And he even said, I'm playing some safety and cornerback, and Tommy, like I wonder if they're going to put. Like Tommy Hill and Newsome as corners and have, Hartzog be kind of a nickel / safety.
That would be
And
nice.
then you've got Gifford and Omar Brown as another guy that's played some cornerback. So there's a lot of guys that, because that's the thing is like you could put you could just move them around and do a lot of different things with them.
Because he has speed. Like he can get after the passer. I mean, he blocked a punt last year.
yeah, and he's
So I
got
mean,
ball skills too. I feel like if you had played him back at safety, I just feel like he would be able to go get the ball. You know what I mean? And at least like at times it's nice to have that eraser type guy that, if there's a deep ball, like he can track it and just, he's quick enough and he's got the ball skills, I feel like, to be that kind of player. And just, and then, but then too, if you've got, someone in the slot that you need to cover, I mean, he can do that. We've seen him do press man too. So it'll be interesting to see how they're all utilized. And maybe it's a situation like if you, where he moves around a little bit. Sometimes you play with, him as your safety. Maybe sometimes he's a cornerback, and maybe that's matchup dependent too. Which that's really what your defense needs to be. Like you need to be able to, change it up every week like a chameleon or whatever. Because if you're facing, Michigan one week and then the next week you're playing, I mean, I guess Wisconsin now because they're a open it up type. You need to be able to play. You need to be able to use, like have 8 guys in the box and stuff the run, but you also need to be able to have like 5 or 6 guys in the box and stop a pass, spread offense. So I feel like being able to, fix, instead of just being like, we're going to play, like the Bears, like we're going to play cover 2 defense, like the old Lovie Smith Bears, like we're going to play cover 2 no matter what. Like you need to be able to match your scheme to what you're facing that week. And I feel like under Tony White's scheme with this 3-3-5, we have a lot better ability to do that.
The Chicago Bears days of the cover 2 and Rex Grossman. What a time to be alive, isn't it? And
Yeah.
one of the guys that I'm looking forward to seeing, honestly, is Tommy Hill, because I don't feel like he got, a good shot in a good scheme last year, and I think he's a really good athlete. I mean, heck, they moved him over to wide receiver at one point before the Purdue game last year, so I'm excited to see what a guy like him can do with proper coaching. And I feel like I can say that about a lot of guys. Now that they have a proper coaching staff, I'm excited to see what they can do and how. And I feel like this staff is good at identifying players' strengths and weaknesses and putting them in positions to succeed. So I'm excited to see what a guy like Tommy Hill can do with his speed and his recognition in terms of where the ball is and things like that.
Yeah, and the other staff wasn't good at putting, recognizing strengths and weak. They're like, oh, we'll have, Tommy Hill probably is pretty fast, a man corner playing like 10 yards off, and then we'll have,
Yeah.
Our offensive tackles who aren't great pass blockers, just in zero protection with no help whatsoever.
I just remember the Georgia Southern game when they literally had when the Georgia Southern wide
Yeah,
receivers had a 20-yard cushion, and we were like, "What are you doing? Like, play up, play up!" And poor Tommy Hill got roasted on social media because he was playing like in the parking lot while the Georgia Southern receivers were running curl routes. But I mean, I don't think that was him. I think that was a scheme that Shenander wanted to play at the time. So, well, I'm glad he's Boise State's problem now. Shenander, that is. I'll just say that.
yeah, that not a good hire, Boise State. I'll just throw that out there, but whatever. But yeah, I am excited to see because Tommy Hill went from, they're like, when he came here to Nebraska, in the portal, they're like, oh, this guy's got NFL talent at quarterback, and then like week 4, he's playing wide receiver. It's like, what's going on here?
Well, I think he
So
does, and that's the thing. I think they just misused him so badly because I remember when Nebraska missed out on him initially when they recruited him, and I was kind of disappointed. But I mean, you look at what he can bring to the table. He has that speed, he has that play recognition, and this was a guy that won a state championship as a senior in high school, and I think that he has the chance to really kind of turn the page and get a fresh start. And I think that's important as well. I mean, you talk about a guy that was a 4-star prospect. I mean, he definitely has talent. And I just feel like, I mean, he was the 11th overall athlete in his recruiting class that year. So, I mean, I'm just excited to see what he can do and what other guys can do, but I think he's one of the ones that I'm looking forward to watching the most. I mean, he was recruited by Alabama and Auburn, and he ended up going to Arizona State. But just guys like that who haven't reached their potential, what can they do, and how can they impact the game with a competent coaching staff now?
yeah, there's a lot of guys like that. So that will be interesting. And let's shift gears a little bit. We mentioned Trey Palmer at the top of the show. Caught a touchdown last night, for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Earlier this week, he was, on the 2 deep for the Bucs, and it's looking very, I would say he's in a very good position to make
Yeah.
this 53-man roster. He's not the only Husker. Garrett Nelson had a sack last night for the Dolphins. Samori Toure, who made the Packers last year and caught a touchdown, had 3 catches for 56 yards. So he looks like his spot is pretty solid with Green Bay. But overall, a pretty last night was kind of the first night of every not every team, but a lot of teams playing preseason. It was pretty good a debut night for the Huskers and their former alums.
Absolutely. I mean, Trey Palmer had 4 catches for 33 yards and a touchdown, averaging 8 yards per reception. That's a solid start if you want to get to the NFL these days. And he connected. Baker Mayfield found him in the back of the end zone on a nice what looked like a fade type of play. And hey, any receiver that can make Baker Mayfield look good should stay around. So kudos to Palmer. And I thought he was very slept on in the draft. I understand he had drop issues, and I understand that his size, isn't necessarily he's not the tallest, but you get the ball in his hands and he can make things happen. He's fast. I mean, Purdue saw that last year, and a bunch of other teams saw that last year. Iowa saw that last year, so I'm ha- I'm happy for him, and the more Huskers we get into the NFL, the better. And let's hope Matt Rule can continue the trend.
Yeah, I definitely hope. I think there's going to be more, Nebraska players going into the NFL. It was good to see, Nelson make a play, and that's going to, at least put him in a position to make the practice squad. Even if a guy doesn't make the 53-man roster, making the practice squad, that's a good it's a good living for a year. You make almost 100 grand, and it gives you a real. And the thing about it is that almost every guy that makes it on the practice squad at some point is probably going to get up on the active roster this season, as long as you keep progressing, because NFL teams obviously, like they go through injuries like crazy, especially with going to 17 games now. So if Garrett Nelson has a solid preseason, and that's the thing too, is like a nice thing about being on the practice squad is like if he's on the Dolphins, right? Well, if the Packers are like, oh man, I need a defensive end, and if they go to ask him to play, like the Dolphins either need to put him on their roster or give him a boost in pay, or he can move freely to another active roster. So it is a good practice squad spots are very valuable trying to get into the league, especially because the NFL doesn't have like a G League or any. I mean, and I know they have all these minor leagues, but the practice squad is your best place to be if you're not on an NFL roster to start the season. And I think that Garrett Nelson at least put himself in a position to be, in that, and if he keeps getting sacks, he'll probably have a good chance of making the 53, because it's not like, I mean, he made that play fairly early, like in the second quarter. So it's not like it was fourth quarter garbage time against like the fifth string tackle. So I feel like he made a good first impression.
And a lot of times the practice squad players, mimic things for the starting offense in practice. So he'll get experience and, you know, reps that way as well. So I'm excited to see what Nelson can make of this opportunity. I think Trey Palmer is well on his way, and like you said about Nelson, as long as they keep progressing, they're gonna be in good shape when roster cutdowns happen.
Which happened pretty quick. Honestly, it's like 2 weeks from now.
Yep.
It's an accelerated process with the extra regular season game, which is kind of nice because the preseason's stupid. Let's just play some real football. Although if
Too many unneeded
Nebraska,
injuries.
yeah, if Nebraska had a preseason game, I'd definitely watch it though. Even if they, filmed a little scrimmage at practice today, I would definitely watch that.
I mean,
So
90,000 came to the spring game, so there you go. I'm sure you wouldn't be the only one.
But we should get some highlights. I'm guessing a little highlight video from, the official Nebraska, Twitter account today. They'll come out with that. So that's always, you can always catch a few glimpses here or there. And last thing to kind of wrap things up on the show, just to kind of, touch base on what's been going on with recruiting this week. There, Grant Bricks has been doing a bunch of interviews. Caleb Benning did an interview with the Omaha World Herald, which was kind of interesting. Jay Sean Ross is still out there. So, nothing really big time happening, but, it seems like Nebraska is in a good spot, at least for those three guys. I know we have talked about Caleb Benning's timeline a bunch. The Omaha, I didn't see him say it. I read through the Omaha, article once, and then actually I clicked back and it wanted me to subscribe, so I didn't do that. But, um, but Evan Bland said that the decision could come in September. So I'm assuming that that's what Caleb Benning obviously told him. To me, if it happens anytime within the next month, it's going to be, I have to believe it's Nebraska. And I
Yeah.
do think, I know a lot of people maybe aren't that like super excited about him, but before he got hurt, man, like I was scrolling through his Twitter, and he took visits to a lot of, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, just a bunch of Big Ten schools. Right now, it seems like it's Kansas State, Nebraska. But if this guy hadn't got hurt, and once he puts together the kind of season I think he will this fall, it wouldn't shock me if they're like Oklahoma or some of these other schools started showing some interest, especially if their cornerback or their safety boards, were a little bit thin.
So now that Benning, not that he ever left the picture, but now that things are heating up, you know, I wonder where that leaves. No, I'm blanking
Amar-
on the name. Amari Sanders. There we go.
Amari Sanders, yeah.
So, I think it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, and it's going to be interesting to see what they do with Donovan Jones and if they land Caleb Benning. Where they're going to put both of them, because I think both of them are good athletes, and having those two on your defense, to develop and continue to grow, I think is a solid combo, because I feel like Benning and Jones are similar in play style in the sense that they attack the football really well. They move well. They have good instincts. So I think that both of those, the combo of those two, would fit this defense pretty well.
Yeah, I've thought about that too with Amari Sanders and how it fits. But to me, like him and Benning are different. He's a corner, Benning's more of a safety. So I don't know that. I mean, I know there's a lot of defensive back numbers, but frankly, I just don't think Nebraska cares. I mean, I think that they feel like this is. I'm sure it's not like they're going to take 40 kids in this class. I mean, they do have a limit for numbers, but just the way that they've recruited. Although we haven't heard a lot about Sanders, so maybe that is falling off a bit, or maybe they're like, well, we don't really need another cornerback as much. I'm not really sure. It wouldn't surprise. Would not surprise me though if they took both. And then I think they're trying to get one more offensive lineman and at least one pass rusher. So there's a few guys out there, but Jay Sean Ross is one. I've read some stuff about Tennessee being in the mix, and that it seemed like one. I don't remember which report it was, but and maybe it was from like Munson or somebody from Husker Online. But I think it was saying that he was kind of hoping for better opportunities than Nebraska. Maybe that's why he's trying hoping with Tennessee. So I'm not sure. I know that Ross has got those projections, but there's a lot. They've come from like Oklahoma reporters, 2 out of the 3. So I'm still kind of skeptical there, and I'm still wondering if he really wants to come to Nebraska or if that's just like the best option he has right now. But if a better one comes along in his mind, if he would take that. So I'm still a little skeptical on the Ross commitment or recruitment.
Sanders is going to make he said, quote, a commitment sometime this month, most likely. I have 2 visits that's going to be set up, end quote. So, I mean, maybe we'll see a decision soon. But I feel like, kind of a little bit quiet on the recruitment front for Sanders. He got those crystal balls. I think was it the beginning of July that he got those?
Maybe the middle part of July.
Middle
I
part,
can't quite
and
remember, but
then we didn't really hear much. So I'm wondering, I've always said, the Sanders and Benning recruitment are kind of go hand in hand to me, depending on the decision of one of those guys that will kind of affect the other one's decision as well. So I mean, I don't know. We'll see. I thought maybe Benning was kind of out of the cards, but you never know with recruiting.
yeah, I mean, I think he took the 3 visits, that one, right after the dead period ended. So that really made me think that Nebraska's making a push for him, or at least wants him in the class, and that's what it sounds. He made it sound like Nebraska's prioritizing him. So I know Kansas State's doing a good job, and I wouldn't count them out. They have obviously just won a conference championship, and they've got some really talented players too. So we'll see how it all works out. I do think Nebraska's getting close to, I think they're going to add maybe, 3 to 5 more commitments and, maybe get to that 30 range, probably come up a little bit short of that. And then I think they'll pivot towards 2025, which they have done a lot. But, Grant Bricks, I believe he actually told the reporter August 25th. So he's got a date in mind. So that's happening within the next 2 weeks. And it's tough. It's interesting because, it's not like he's not going to be on campus anywhere before that happens. It's a dead period. So it's going to be, the coaches are going to be like, doing the textings type stuff, and they can still communicate electronically. So they're going to be recruiting their tails off in that way. But Oklahoma apparently has got some momentum with Grant Bricks, so we'll see. I know they've always kind of talked about him being Midwest, and the idea was that it would be Kansas State or Nebraska, and Nebraska probably winning out there. But Oklahoma's always worried me too. So and Alabama's out there, so we'll see. But it would be a huge commitment for Nebraska, and that would obviously lessen. I'm sure that will still make a run at Brandon Baker just because he's an elite, player. But it would certainly lessen the need to land him if they already have Grant Bricks in this class.
If they land both, I'd be happy.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
couldn't complain about that at all.
but I don't. I mean, I personally think they're gonna either land one or the other. But I mean, the fact that they still have a visit set up with Baker's good. That way, if they don't land Bricks, then at least they can try for Baker. And overall, in terms of this year and the future years, I feel much better about the state of the offensive line than I did even at this time last year.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to say too about Baker, we mentioned this on our stream last week that we both don't believe that Nebraska is not going to get both, and it's not a situation where Nebraska wouldn't take both. Obviously, they would take both if they could, but if you have two like elite left tackles, they're probably not going to be in the same class on the same team. That's just they both probably want to. Like, yeah, sure, I'm sure Grant Bricks could play right tackle, but you know what? You make more money in the NFL if you play left tackle. So, I mean, that's just like I don't think Brandon Baker is going to be like, sure, I'll bump over to right tackle. Like I know once you get them on campus, it's easier to make those things happen. But it just guys do pay attention to how many kids you have in your class, and if you've already got one of the best left tackles, then that might just make them shy away a little bit so that they feel like they have their full opportunity. And that's just kind of how recruiting operates anymore.
And honestly, they're recruiting Andrew Babalola too, who is also a highly ranked tackle. So that makes me wonder if they're just planning to land one or the other, and kind of making sure they get a solid tackle in the 2025 class as well. So, I mean, they're covering all the bases that they need to. Now it's just about who is going to come to Lincoln.
And I really hope that the offensive line play on the field ramps up, and I think it's going to because Donovan Raiola is doing a great job on the recruiting trail,
Yes.
like you said with 2025. There's some other 2025 guys he's in a good spot with too. So I hope that he can back that up, and that he's going to be on the staff for a long time because recruiting wise, he's really starting to ramp it up. I think that's a good thing.
Well, I think when you're allowed to do what you want to do, it makes a big difference.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like when you can say, okay, this is going to be my offensive coordinator's style. Here's how you're going to fit in, and this is why it's going to work for you. I mean, there were times last year where, sure, Mark Whipple's offense was really great in terms of production, but it didn't match up with what an offensive lineman, is best at. And I think that kind of, scared away some lineman targets. And I think this offensive system is also better. Now it's going to be about execution, obviously, but on paper, I feel like this offensive system is, more conducive to linemen.
Well, it's like you have to coach the team that you have, and Mark Whipple wanted to coach the team he had in Pittsburgh apparently the year before with Kenny Pickett and Jordan Addison and a better offensive line. It's like you didn't have that. Yeah, you had Casey Thompson and Trey Palmer. Sorry, I keep getting my words mixed up today, but you didn't have the offensive line
Right.
to just go empty protection and bomb it out. Like so, that did put you have to be a really good offensive line to just have zero. And sometimes they would have a back in. Okay, Anthony Grant at times did not do spectacular in protection. I'll just say that we could find somebody, but sometimes he just seemed a little bit lost. Where he should have filled in here, but he would kind of leak out for a route earlier. Just little things like that.
When
Not
you
saying he
listen to
can't block.
EJ Barthel talk though, and like talk about Grant and his blocking and his ability to read plays, I'm not so sure Grant was ever taught how to properly block last year. I mean, because it sounded like he had to do like an overhaul with Grant on how to block, and this is where you go, and this is why you're patient on a
Yeah.
particular running play, and just like little things like that I think were missed last year, like little coaching techniques, taking care of the little things, stuff like that. I don't know if he was ever properly coached on how to block or what to do in certain protection situations. That's just my personal read on it.
No, definitely is from the way he played, because at times he would hit the hole too hard, and if he would just kind of blast in there full speed and you get 2 or 3 yards, but it's like if you would have just shown a little bit of patience and vision, you could have got, turned that into 7 or 8, maybe, with the move here or there. And so a good running back coach, kind of like there's certain positions where I feel like position coaches matter more in terms of like on-field performance, and running back is definitely one of them. Running back and offensive line. I mean, you can
Yep.
say that about every position to an extent, but
Eh,
just those
I
little
mean,
things like with running back, I think do really matter. And EJ Barth, I think, is going to upgrade that position big time.
tight ends. I mean, I think you can get away with a meh coach. I mean, honestly, like generally speaking, I don't know. I'm just saying some of the positions where you can get away with kind of a meh coach, but I mean, it also didn't help last year when Anthony Grant would be running and there would be 7 Gophers in the backfield by the time he got the ball. So, I mean, they knew
Yeah,
what was coming and they knew when to bring the house and they knew this our offensive line last year wasn't going to do shit about it. So, I mean, it was pretty easy for them to for the defenses to okay, they're going to run Grant. Grant's their best player. Let's key on him this week and hope for the best. And a lot of times it worked. And we got on Anthony Grant for not, playing at a high level at times last year. But overall, I feel like that was a lot of, because of the offensive scheme. And frankly, he just didn't have many holes to run through.
yeah, and he still almost had 1,000 yards, so
Yeah.
it was a productive season. And again, I don't know if anybody's going to get 1,000 yards this year. I feel like him and Gabe Urban are going to be like in that 800 range. So we'll see. It'll be interesting to see how it goes, and we're getting in here close. So
Mm.
yeah, so make sure everybody that hit subscribe on our channel here, the Husker Big Red YouTube channel. We've been growing it a lot lately, and we'd love to have more subscribers. So make sure you hit the like button, share our content for all the other Husker fans in your life. And yeah, we'll be back on Monday with another episode. Any final thoughts, Danny, before we head off to our Saturdays?
I'm just excited, man. I'm excited. Fall camp season coming soon. It's been a long time coming, and I am so ready. I got so excited about NFL preseason this week, and the one thing I don't like about football season is that it leads into winter, and I don't like that. But I love the fall, so I'm ready.
Fall's the best time of the year, and 4 Saturdays from today, we're going to be getting ready to kick Colorado's ass. So,
I
on
can't
that
wait.
note, everybody have a great weekend, and as always, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.